In April 2004, the United States military told a grieving nation that one of its bravest soldiers had died, charging an enemy position in the mountains of Afghanistan. They awarded him a Silver Star. They called him a hero. He was, but not for the reasons they claimed. 18 months earlier, this man had walked away from a $3.6 million NFL contract to become an Army Ranger. His name was Pat Tillman, and everything the military told America about how he died was a lie. Number one, the boy from the hills. Patrick Daniel Tillman grew up in New Almaden, a former quicksilver mining settlement tucked into the hills south of San Jose, California. His mother Danny was a special education teacher, his father was a lawyer. The three Tillman boys, Pat, Kevin, and Richard, were raised on 3 rules. Tell the truth, respect your elders, stand up for anyone who can't stand up for themselves. The television stayed off in the Tillman house. The boys spent their days tearing through the oak groves and creeks of the Santa Cruz foothills, building forts, catching snakes, and fighting each other with a ferocity that worried the neighbors. Pat was the oldest, the ringleader, the one who turned every backyard game into a full contact war. Kevin, 14 months younger, was his shadow, his rival, and eventually his fellow soldier. But at 16, something unexpected happened. Pat started keeping a journal. What he put on those pages shattered every assumption about the loud, aggressive kid his classmates thought they knew. He mourned the death of a family cat. He questioned whether religion could explain existence. He confessed he couldn't even be unkind to another person without being consumed by guilt, that he was too aware of their pain to be cruel. A fighter with a philosopher's conscience. That contradiction sat at the center of Pat Tillman's entire life, and it revealed itself violently on a Friday night outside a pizza restaurant in 1993. Number 2, 30 days in a cell. After a high school football victory in the fall of 1993, Pat and a group of friends ended up at a Round Table Pizza in San Jose. A fight broke out in the parking lot. Pat's friend Jeff Hechtley was in trouble, and Pat, fueled by alcohol and adrenaline, came charging out to help. In the confusion, he attacked the wrong person, a teenager named Darren Rosas who had nothing to do with it. Pat beat him badly, broken teeth, a concussion. He was 17 years old, a star athlete with every door open, and now he was facing felony assault charges. The case went to juvenile court. The charge was reduced to a misdemeanor, but the sentence was 30 days in detention. Beginning the weekend, he graduated from Leland High School. While his classmates celebrated summer, Pat sat in a cell. He performed community service at the Julian Street Inn homeless shelter afterward, and he said he learned more from that one terrible mistake than from every good decision he'd ever made. The people closest to him believed it. That night, the shame, the consequences, the kid he hurt for no reason became the bedrock of a code he carried to his grave. Tell the truth. Own the damage. Never hide from what you've done. He reported to Arizona State a few weeks after his release, carrying a chip on his shoulder and a body that every coach in America said was too small for big-time football. Number 3, too small for the draft, too stubborn to care. Only 3 Division I programs recruited Pat Tillman. He'd hoped for Stanford, but they said his grades weren't high enough. Arizona State gave him their last available scholarship. When head coach Bruce Snyder suggested redshirting him for a 5th year, Tillman told him he had things to do with his life, and in 4 years, he'd be gone. He delivered. By his sophomore year, he was starting. In 1996, his defense shut out 2-time defending national champion Nebraska, snapping a 26-game winning streak. He became the first Sun Devil ever named Pac-10 Defensive Player of the Year. And he did something almost unheard of for a football player at that level. Graduated summa cum laude in 3.5 years with a 3.84 GPA, carrying 16 credits per semester while his teammates carried 12. A faculty advisor later said he always assumed Pat would end up in the United States Senate. The NFL disagreed. The 1998 draft came and went through 225 picks before the Arizona Cardinals, a franchise that hadn't made the playoffs in 50 years, called his name at at 226. His signing bonus was $21,000. He couldn't afford a car, so he rode a bicycle to the team facility, walked into the defensive coordinator's office, and told him he'd be the starting safety. He was. As a rookie. The Cardinals reached the postseason for the first time in 51 years. By 2000, Tillman held the franchise tackle record. The St. Louis Rams, reigning Super Bowl champions, offered him $9 million over 3 years. He turned it down out of loyalty to Arizona, kept the same beat-up college truck, had no cell phone, started a master's in history. Then a clear September morning changed everything. Number 4, the day the stadium went silent. On September 11th, 2001, the Cardinals had an opening week bye. The Tempe facility was nearly empty. Pat was one of the few players in the building when the first plane hit the North Tower. He watched the second impact standing next to a beat reporter and said almost nothing for a long time. When he finally spoke, what came out wasn't grief or rage. It was shame. He said professional athletes were worthless, that they were actors playing a game while other people carried the real weight. The next day, he gave one of the last voluntary interviews of his life. He talked about stopping at a time like this and thinking about what kind of freedoms you're allowed. His great-grandfather had been at Pearl Harbor. His family had served in every American war. And he, a man who tackled people on Sundays, hadn't done a damn thing. He played the remaining 15 games of the 2001 season. He married Marie on May 4th, 2002, the woman he'd known since they were 4 years old. Somewhere on their honeymoon, the decision locked into place. He was going to enlist. What Pat didn't know was that the Pentagon had already taken notice. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld personally wrote Tillman a congratulatory letter when the news broke. The military machine that would eventually destroy his legacy had already started building its version of who Pat Tillman was. They saw a recruiting poster, a face for the war, and Pat was about to hand them one, on terms they never expected. Number 5, the letter he left behind. On May 31st, 2002, Pat and Kevin Tillman walked into a recruiting office and enlisted together. Pat left the $3.6 million contract behind. His new salary, roughly $18,000 a year. He refused every interview request, every book deal, every endorsement offer. When reporters demanded to know why he wouldn't talk about it, his silence was the only answer they got. Days before deciding, a Cardinals executive had found him sitting alone at the team facility reading the Quran. He said he wanted to understand the difference between it and the Bible before he went to war. That detail, an NFL safety, studying the holy text of the people he was being sent to fight, never made it into the Pentagon's version of Pat Tillman. It didn't fit the poster they were building. But there was something else Pat did before he deployed, something the public wouldn't learn about for years. He wrote Marie a letter, the kind a man writes when he knows he might not come back. In it, he told her that through the years, he had asked a great deal of her, and the last thing he asked was one word: live. Marie would carry that letter through everything that came next, through the deployment, through the knock on the door, through the lies, and through years of fighting for the truth about how her husband actually died. She would honor every word of it. But first, she would have to survive what the United States military was about to do to his memory. Number 6, the soldier they didn't want you to see. Pat and Kevin earned their Ranger tabs with the 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment at Fort Lewis, Washington. Fellow Rangers expected a celebrity who wanted cameras and special treatment. What they got was a quiet, intense reader who carried paperbacks in his cargo pockets. Emerson, Thoreau, the Book of Mormon, and Noam Chomsky. He pulled his weight, kept his head down, and refused to be treated any differently than the 19-year-old private next to him. The brothers deployed to Iraq in 2003 as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Their unit was placed on standby during the Jessica Lynch rescue, an operation the military would later admit had been exaggerated for propaganda purposes. The pattern was not lost on Pat. He watched the bombing of an Iraqi city and told a fellow ranger in language that left no room for misunderstanding that the entire invasion was illegal. A friend confirmed he was deeply opposed to the administration's foreign policy and had quietly arranged to meet Noam Chomsky after returning from deployment, a meeting his death would prevent. When the brothers were given the Arthur Ashe Courage Award at the 2003 ESPYs, they refused to attend. They sent Richard. Pat could have taken an honorable discharge at multiple points. He chose to stay. He completed Ranger School at Fort Benning in November 2003 and deployed to Afghanistan in early 2004. He carried a journal. He wrote in it relentlessly. His doubts about the war, his questions about the mission, his growing belief that the conflict had been sold to the American public on false terms. Those pages would become the most dangerous words the Pentagon had ever encountered, because dead men aren't supposed to disagree with their government. Number 7, the canyon at dusk. Tillman's platoon was 10 days into a sweep operation near the village of Mana in the Spera district of Khost province, jagged terrain pressed against the Pakistani border. A Humvee broke down. Over the strong objection of platoon leader Lieutenant David Uthlout, commanders ordered the unit split in two. Serial 1 with Pat pushed through a narrow canyon toward Mana. Serial 2 with Kevin followed with the disabled vehicle. The canyon walls killed radio contact between the groups. When Serial 2 was ambushed, small arms fire ricocheting off rock in every direction, Pat, Private Brian O'Neill, and an allied Afghan militia fighter named Syed Farhad scrambled to high ground to provide cover. Then Serial 2's lead vehicle emerged from the canyon into blinding dusk. Disoriented by dust and dying light, a squad leader misidentified Farhad as the enemy and opened fire. A machine gunner in his first combat engagement sprayed the hillside with automatic weapons. Farhad was killed instantly. Pat took rounds to his chest plate. He threw a purple smoke grenade, the universal signal for friendly forces. The shooting stopped. Then it started again. From roughly 40 yards, the distance from home plate to second base, Pat Tillman stood up, waving his arms, screaming his own name. 3 rounds struck him in the forehead, grouped so tightly that investigators would later struggle to explain the precision. O'Neill survived. In the seconds before the fatal burst, he had started praying. Pat, the atheist, the man who questioned everything, snapped him out of it. He told O'Neill that praying wasn't going to help them right now. The documentary director later said that act of blunt honesty probably saved O'Neill's life. Pat Tillman was 27 years old. The lie began before his body was cold. Number 8, the burning of the truth. The soldiers on that hillside knew immediately what had happened, but the first official report, filed at 4:40 p.m. on April 22nd before the blood had dried, attributed Tillman's death to enemy forces. It was a lie, and the men who wrote it knew it. The next day, Pat's blood-soaked body armor and uniform were burned. The stated reason was biohazard disposal. His journal, the notebook filled with his private doubts about the war, about the government he had volunteered to serve, was also destroyed. The Army's own investigation later called it a blatant violation of protocol, destruction of evidence. No one was ever punished. Soldiers were ordered not to discuss the truth, not with reporters, not with family, not even with Kevin Tillman, who had been in the same convoy and heard the gunfire that killed his brother. Specialist Russell Bear was assigned to escort Kevin and the body home. He was told to stay silent. He couldn't live with it. Bear eventually went AWOL in protest. The Army demoted him. Meanwhile, officers began drafting a Silver Star, the military's third highest combat decoration, awarded exclusively for gallantry against an armed enemy. The citation described Pat Tillman charging through devastating enemy fire. Every word was fabricated. Major General Stanley McChrystal personally expedited the award, approving it on April 28th so it could be announced at the nationally televised memorial on May 3rd. Millions watched. Senators spoke. A nation mourned a hero who died fighting the enemy. None of it was true, and the men standing at that podium knew it. What McChrystal did the very next day was even worse. Number 9, the memo that proved everything. On April 29, 2004, one day after signing the false Silver Star, Stanley McChrystal sent a priority P4 message to Generals John Abizaid and Brian Brown. It warned that Pat Tillman had very likely been killed by friendly fire and urged senior leaders to be told immediately so they could avoid embarrassment if the president praised Tillman publicly. A White House speech mentioning Tillman was already being drafted. The chain of command knew. They knew 4 days before the memorial. They knew before the fabricated citation was read to a weeping nation. They knew before Pat's family stood in that auditorium, believing their son died, fighting the enemy. And they said nothing for 5 weeks. The Tillmans weren't told the truth until May 29th. Then came the remark that exposed the rot at the center of the cover-up. Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Kauslerich, the same officer who helped draft the Silver Star and led one of the early investigations, told ESPN that the Tillman family kept pushing because they were atheists. He said, "When you die and don't believe in anything, you're just worm dirt." He suggested their demand for the truth was a failure of faith, not a legitimate pursuit of accountability. Mary Tillman responded that her family's spiritual beliefs were none of the military's business, and that Kauslarich's contempt revealed everything about how the institution viewed the people it was supposed to serve. But the Pentagon had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They had lied to a family that was raised on one rule above all others, the same rule Pat had carried since he was a boy in the hills, since the night outside the pizza restaurant, since 30 days in a cell. Tell the truth, and the Tillmans were about to force it out. Number 10, what the Tillmans did next. Mary Tillman went to war, not with a rifle, but with a reading lamp and 3,000 pages of redacted military documents. Night after night at her kitchen table, she cross-referenced testimony, exposed contradictions, and rebuilt the timeline the Pentagon had spent months trying to destroy. Pat's father, a lawyer, wrote a letter to the Army so devastating it forced a second investigation open. Marie refused military pressure to bury Pat at Arlington National Cemetery. He had declined that honor in writing before he deployed. She was not going to let the institution that lied about his death overrule his final wishes to polish its own image. On April 24th, 2007, the Tillman family sat before the House Oversight Committee. Brian O'Neill testified under oath that he had been ordered not to tell Kevin how his brother died. Kevin testified that the military had weaponized Pat's death as propaganda. And Mary Tillman looked at the members of Congress and said the deception was an insult to her family, but its true purpose was to deceive an entire nation. 7 investigations, 7 officers received administrative punishment. One retired general, Philip Kensinger, was censured. Mary called him the scapegoat. McChrystal, the man who signed the fabricated citation and sent the memo proving he knew the truth, was never charged. In 2009, he was promoted to command all American and NATO forces in Afghanistan. No one was ever held criminally accountable. At Pat's memorial, before the cameras and the myths, his youngest brother Richard had walked to the microphone. No script, a beer in his hand. He told the crowd Pat was a champion, that Pat was not with God, that Pat was dead, and anyone who pretended otherwise didn't know his brother. In April 2004, the military told America that Pat Tillman died charging an enemy position. He died a hero. But the bullets that killed him came from American rifles, and the men who buried the truth wore stars on their shoulders. Pat Tillman gave up everything, the money, the fame, the game, not for a poster or a slogan, but because he believed in something honest. Marie still carries the letter. The last thing he ever asked of her was one word. Live, she did, and she made sure the truth lived with her. If this story moved you, subscribe. We tell the ones they tried to bury. And if you believe Stanley McChrystal should have faced a courtroom instead of a promotion, say so in the comments. The Tillman family is still waiting.